In a move that wasn't a total surprise but still shook the markets, the US Federal Reserve cut its key interest rate by 25 basis points. This is the second time this year they've hit the easy button, citing elevated uncertainty about the economy, which is code for things are looking a bit shaky. The markets, of course, loved it. The S&P 500 rallied like it was 1999, high on cheap money. But here's the joke. The Fed admitted their decision was split, and thanks to the government shutdown, they're making these calls while completely blind. They haven't gotten clean economic data in weeks. Powell signaled this might be the last cut for a while, but don't buy it. The uncertainty, aka the government shutdown, is still happening. If the economy truly stalls, they won't hesitate. They are terrified of a total recession and will pump more cheap money into the system to keep this fragile party going. Moving on to geopolitics. After months of threatening each other, President Trump and Xi Jinping finally met in Asia and agreed to a fragile truce. The US will roll back some tariffs, and in exchange, China will resume exporting those critical rare earth minerals that all our tech depends on. Again, the stock market was so relieved it almost cried, rallying on the news, because Wall Street is desperate for any good news. But let's be honest, everyone knows this is just a photo op. These two pretended to like each other for a day to calm the markets, but the fundamental conflict is completely unchanged. Let's be real. This isn't peace. This is just hitting the pause button. The real war, the technological war over AI, chips, and who controls the 21st century, is accelerating. This truce won't last. Expect both sides to use this quiet time to prepare their next economic attack. Moving to US politics. The government shutdown is now dragging into its fifth week, and the political theater in Washington has reached peak absurdity. Hundreds of thousands of federal workers are still at home without pay, while politicians argue over who gets to brag about winning the budget fight. The impact is no longer theoretical. We're talking real consequences. Food assistance programs for millions are set to stop on November 1st. Head Start programs for children are closing. And all of this is happening while members of Congress still get paid. Trump is now publicly calling for the Senate to use the nuclear option to end the filibuster and force a vote. This is insanely risky. It's like trying to put out a small fire by using a flamethrower. It might solve this crisis, but it would permanently break the US political system, leading to total gridlock for years to come. Moving to a major security crisis in South America. The Brazilian military launched one of the largest ever police operations in Rio de Janeiro's favelas. The goal? To contain the Red Command drug cartel. The result? A bloodbath. Over 100 people were killed in what looked less like policing and more like urban warfare. Human rights groups are screaming, calling it a massacre of the poor and a complete failure of state policy. The local population is now terrified, caught between the cartels and the even more violent state police. This operation didn't solve the problem. It just disappeared 100 people and left a power vacuum. More violence. That's always what's next. The cartels will retaliate. The police will crack down again. This isn't a solution. It's a cycle. The government thinks it can solve a deep social problem, poverty, drugs, with bullets. Spoiler, it never works. Turning now to a major humanitarian crisis. The UN issued its strongest warning yet for Sudan, calling the situation in Darfur simply horrific and catastrophic. A paramilitary force has besieged the last major city, trapping hundreds of thousands of civilians, and all life-saving humanitarian aid is being blocked. The impact is starvation, mass displacement, and horrific violence. But the bigger impact? The world's deafening silence. While global leaders tweet about other conflicts, Darfur is becoming a black hole. There is no 24-hour news coverage, no celebrity fundraisers, just nothing. What's next is more of the same, unless the media finally decides to care. Without international pressure, these paramilitary groups have no reason to stop blocking aid. This isn't a crisis that needs a solution, it needs witnesses. And right now, no one is watching. Moving to the Middle East. The UN reported this week that humanitarian aid scale-up in Gaza is failing. Despite a ceasefire, life-saving supplies are being blocked for the third day in a row, not by active fighting, but by diplomatic rerouting and arguments over congested and damaged roads. The impact is simple: less food. The World Food Programme, WFP, said its distribution is barely running. For the third day in a row, aid collections were limited by paperwork and road arguments. It's a bureaucratic nightmare where diplomats argue over which road to use while actual people are running out of actual food. More meetings, more arguments, and less food. This is the predictable tragedy of modern conflict. The UN is begging for additional crossings and routes to be opened. But this isn't a logistical problem, it's a political one. And until the politics are solved, the road will remain damaged. Turning to technology. Just 1 week after the AWS crash, Microsoft's Azure cloud also had a catastrophic global outage. For 6 hours, banks, government services, airlines, and crucially, thousands of AI models went dark. It's almost like building our entire global infrastructure on 2 companies is a bad idea. The impact was total paralysis. We're not just talking about Xbox. We're talking healthcare systems unable to access patient records and banking apps that just stopped. This isn't an inconvenience, it's a critical infrastructure failure. The ripple effect cost the global economy billions. Again, the cloud was sold to us as invincible. It's not. It's just someone else's computer. And now, everyone is running on the same 2 computers, Amazon and Microsoft. The next step is a terrified panic toward multi-cloud. But let's be honest, that just means also buying from Google. This is the definition of a global oligopoly. Updating last week's biggest scandal. The Louvre robbery investigation took a shocking turn. This wasn't Mission Impossible from the outside. It was an inside job. French police arrested a senior art curator from the museum itself, accusing them of disabling the security systems for the thieves. The art world is horrified. This isn't just theft, it's a betrayal. It means that no museum, no matter how secure, is safe if you can just buy the curator. The insurance premiums for major art collections are about to skyrocket, and public trust in these institutions is shattered. What's next is a global witch hunt. Every major museum is now frantically running internal background checks on its own staff. Expect more surprising arrests at other institutions. The era of trusting the quiet intellectual curator is over. Now, everyone is a potential suspect. Alright, now for some terrifying military news that sounds like a bad Bond movie. Russia confirmed it successfully tested a Poseidon underwater drone. This isn't just any drone. It's a nuclear-capable torpedo designed to sneak past defenses and create radioactive tsunamis to wipe out coastal cities. The impact is pure terror. It destabilizes everything. This isn't about winning a battlefield. It's about threatening mass extinction. It basically bypasses all existing missile defense systems. Military analysts are calling it a doomsday weapon, designed for revenge, not defense. What's next is a brand new, terrifyingly expensive arms race, underwater. The US will now be forced to spend billions developing its own version of this, or some magical anti-tsunami shield. It's the 1980s Cold War all over again, but wetter and dumber. And our final story, a political earthquake in South America. Argentina's far-right, anarcho-capitalist president Javier Milei just crushed the midterm elections. His party won a landslide victory, giving him the political power he needed to continue his chainsaw plan for the economy. Donald Trump immediately called to congratulate him. The impact is shock therapy. Milei's plan to abolish the central bank and dollarize the economy isn't a joke anymore. It's happening. The markets, weirdly, love the stability this brought, with the currency finally steadying. But the impact on the street? Massive protests and brutal cuts to public services. Milei is now the poster child for the global far-right, proving that radical economic populism can actually win. The real test is next. Can he actually govern? Expect massive resistance from unions and the old political guard. South America is now the world's biggest economic experiment. And that is our world, unfolded. Another week of total absurdity, from failing governments to even more failing tech. The story, as always, is far from over. But that's why we're here. We don't just report the chaos, we analyze what happens next. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.